Family, for most of us, is where love begins, where first hugs begin, and where safety is a place to rest. But sometimes, it is the place that sows the seeds of indelible tragedy. Amber Gibson was born in 2005 and grew up in South Lanarkshire, Scotland. She was a lovely girl, talented in art, loved to sing, loved life, although behind that smile was a torn childhood. Together with her brother Connor Gibson, they grew up in a violent family. Their father, Peter Gibson, was an abusive man who regularly beat their mother, Anne-Marie Adams, for many years. In 2008, Peter was sentenced to 10 years in prison for a number of violent crimes. But that ending did not bring peace. On the contrary, it marked the beginning of a new tragedy. Anne-Marie, the mother, drowned herself in alcohol, neglecting her children. When Amber was 3 and Connor was 5, they were taken from their mother and placed with a foster couple, Craig and Carol Niven, and over the next few years, they tried to provide a real home for 2 children who had been deeply traumatized. Amber, despite her tumultuous childhood, was a resilient child. She was cheerful, artistic, and always making people laugh. But Connor was different. He was shy, unsociable, and showed signs of emotional turmoil from an early age. Teachers noticed that he was prone to anger, especially with girls, and often fell into hostile, violent behavior. As Connor entered his teens, his behavior became more and more apparent. He often shared his feelings on social media about loneliness, depression, and feeling misunderstood. Connor believed that he had brought all his misfortune upon himself. But instead of seeking help, he began to blame the world, especially those closest to him. In Connor's eyes, Amber, his biological sister, gradually became a thorn in his side. She was active and loved, while he was lost and shunned. The arguments began. They escalated into fights, to the point that their foster parents were forced to separate the 2 siblings, sending each to a different school to avoid conflict. November 2021. Amber, now 16, lives at Hill House, a juvenile detention center. She no longer lives with Connor, but the 2 have remained loosely in touch. They no longer fight, but they have never truly reconciled. On November 26, Amber told friends that she would see her brother again. She hoped that the old days, the arguments, the anger, were behind her. She posted a selfie with Connor, captioned, "My big bro." She looked happy. That was the last time anyone saw Amber alive. As Connor entered his teens, his behavior became more and more apparent. He often shared his feelings on social media about loneliness, depression. Connor then returned to his accommodation, a youth homeless shelter called the Blue Triangle Project, with mud on his hands and dirty clothes. A staff member asked him what he had done. Connor simply said, "My sister and I had an argument, and then I left." He didn't worry, didn't call to check on them. He didn't tell anyone that Amber was missing. Only when Hill House realized Amber hadn't returned did the alarm go off. But by then it was too late. 2 days later, Amber's body was found in a park in Hamilton, not far from where she had last been seen. She had been beaten, strangled, her clothes torn, and her body covered with branches. News of her death shocked Scotland. Who could do such a brutal thing to a 16-year-old girl? When the forensic agency examined the body, they discovered obvious bruises on the neck and head, indicating that Amber had been attacked with extreme anger. DNA analysis later found traces of her brother, Connor Gibson, on Amber's body and the clothes she was wearing, and then, a horrifying truth gradually emerged. When Amber Gibson was found dead in Cadzow Glen Park on November 28, 2021, the people of Scotland were stunned. A beautiful 16-year-old girl who had overcome an abusive childhood was murdered in such a cruel way. But what shocked everyone even more was, the number one suspect was her own relative, her brother Connor Gibson. Connor initially denied any involvement. He told the police that on the night of November 26, he and Amber had just gone for a walk and argued. Connor said he left his sister alone in the park and returned to the hostel. But the details began to fall apart when the investigator asked, "Where did you leave Amber?" Connor couldn't pinpoint the exact location. He said he got lost in the park and fell into a ditch. But when asked to point to the location on a map, he was stumped. No one could back up Connor's story. Police tracked down surveillance cameras around Hamilton. 9:51 p.m. November 26, Amber posts a selfie with Connor, captioned "My big bro." 6 minutes later, they were seen walking across a bridge near the park, very close to where her body was found. At around 1 a.m. November 27, a camera at the Blue Triangle Motel caught Connor pushing a large trash can out of the building, into the parking lot, and returning with the empty bin. No one knew what he had thrown away, but it was clear that there was something to hide. Investigators began collecting the clothes Connor had worn that fateful night. Jacket, shoes, all had blood and mud stains. Analysis showed the blood was Amber's. Connor even tried to wash it. Clean clothes, but without success. Connor's DNA was also found on the briefs Amber was wearing, a pair of underwear-like shorts. Connor's DNA was also found. When arrested, Connor's phone was confiscated. Police found suspicious search history, such as magnifying glass tilted right. How do I keep the police from tracking my phone? Magnifying glass tilted right. How do I get blood stains out of my clothes? Connor also texted his friend at 3 a.m. Mobile phone, I really need your help. Call me when you get back, it's important. Then another message, don't worry, everything's fine. The forensics confirmed Amber had been hit hard on the head, then strangled to death. There were 8 visible bruises on her neck. She was stripped, thrown under a tree and covered with branches. The manner of the killing was brutal, showing a personal motive and deep anger. The judge described, the perpetrator clearly knew the victim. This was not a random attack. And there was also undeniable evidence. Connor's DNA was found in many sensitive areas on Amber's body. Suspicions of sexual assault were also raised. Although Connor was not charged with rape, the act showed signs of sexual assault. The story was already horrifying, and was made even more haunting when another man, Stephen Corrigan, 45, was also arrested. Corrigan was the first person to see Amber's body in the park. But instead of reporting it to the police, he raped her. His DNA was found in 39 places on the victim's body, including her thighs, breasts, and buttocks. He denied it, saying he didn't know how the DNA came to be there, but was sentenced to 9 years in prison for desecrating a corpse and obstructing justice. The case is now more than a murder, but a multi-layered tragedy, with unimaginable acts happening one after another. During the 13-day trial, Connor Gibson, 20, maintained his innocence. He hit Amber, but he did not kill her. The cause of death was strangulation, not blunt force trauma, his defense attorney said. But the jury was not convinced. All the evidence, DNA, blood, cameras, text messages, and behavior after the murder, pointed to one person, Connor Gibson. Judge Malcolm Holland sentenced, Amber came to you hoping to make amends, even taking happy photos. Instead, you, her brother, strangled her sister to death. A 16-year-old girl had been through so much, and in the end she died at the hands of the person she trusted the most. September 4, 2023, Connor Gibson was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 22 years before parole, sentence day. The courtroom was silent. Connor Gibson, 20, dressed in prison garb, bowed his head as the judge spoke his final words. Amber came to you with the love of a sister. But the last thing she saw in the world was the angry eyes and the hands around her neck. Amber's death was the terrible consequence of the darkness in her own soul. September 4, 2023, the court sentenced Connor to life in prison, with a minimum of 22 years before parole. The courtroom was almost silent. There was no screaming. No protest. Just a silence as cold as a grave. Amber's foster family, Craig and Carol Niven, sat in the back. They did not cry out loud, but their eyes were red. After the trial, they shared in a statement, "Amber was the most beautiful soul we have ever met. She was cheerful, intelligent, and always brought smiles to everyone. She survived the darkness. But the darkness ultimately came from the person she called brother." Amber Gibson was not born to die like this. She was an abused 3-year-old who was placed in the care system. She used to draw pictures to dispel her trauma. She used to sing to overcome her past. She used to smile for the camera with eyes sparkling with hope, but no matter how far she walked, evil still silently followed her, in the form of her own brother. After the trial, the press and public raised a painful question: could Amber's death have been prevented? Because Connor had a reputation for violence in foster homes. Social experts once said the two siblings should not be close to each other. Connor had been warned not to see Amber alone, but he still had easy access to her. The Hill House manager, where Amber lived before her death, tried to prevent her from seeing her brother. But Amber didn't listen. And society had no strong enough protection system to intervene. The case was not just a cold-blooded crime, but the crystallization of domestic violence, a broken child care system, and an unhealed broken heart. Connor was not born to kill. But he grew up in an environment too dark to understand what love was. The trauma of his father, the separation from his mother, and the feeling of abandonment made Connor a ticking time bomb, and Amber was the one who suffered the consequences. A comment that went viral after the case: Amber didn't die from a single hand strangling her, she died from a series of closed doors when she knocked on them for help. The words echoed like an indictment of society. After the verdict, Hamilton residents set up a small memorial in the park where Amber was found. White flowers, teddy bears, handwritten notes, "Fly high, Amber. You've suffered so much. Rest in peace. We didn't know you, but you're a part of this town's heart." Amber Gibson wrote in her diary, "Sometimes I wish I was born into a different family. But then I think, if I've survived this far, then I must have a reason to exist." She did survive. Until her own brother's hand, the one who once said, "We're safe, sister," wrapped around her neck. Before he was led away to be executed, Connor turned to look at the judge. No apology. No tears. Just a blank face, as if he himself didn't understand how things had gotten this far. But the court understood. The police understood. And all of us, the people who followed this case, understood. A second of losing control. A lifetime behind bars. A girl who can never return home. Amber Gibson, born in 2005, died in 2021. 16 short years, but enough to say a lot about family, about the pain of being forgotten, and about the price of wounds that are not healed. If you find this case thoughtful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your feelings below. There are many more real stories, heartbreaking, complicated, and need to be heard, that we will continue to tell. See you in the next video.